I used to tell myself I was done with that life. Done with soul. Done with the darkness that came dressed in expensive suits. Done with the man who looked at me like I was the only light in a room full of shadows, and then turned out to be the reason the lights went out. I built something small and quiet here in Harare. I work, I cook. I raise my boys, my 3 boys. And then one afternoon, the door of the restaurant opened, and 5 years of running collapsed in a single second because he was standing there, Seo Jin, and he was laughing at me. He thought it was funny. Me, behind a counter, in a uniform, carrying plates. He smirked at me the way powerful men smirk at people they've left behind. But I didn't run this time. I turned toward the back door and I called out 3 names. Kwame J, Tai Levi, Min Olu, come here, my loves. 3 small boys came running out, 3 boys with their father's eyes. And I watched the laughter die on Seo Jin's face, slowly, like a flame being extinguished by cold water. I thought I had left this life behind, but the Korean mafia just found my 3 sons, and their father didn't even know they existed. I was never supposed to be at that event. My professor, Dr. Yoon, had an extra invitation to a charity gala in Gangnam, and she handed it to me the same way she handed me everything, with a tired, distracted wave of her hand. Go, Thandiwe, network, practice your Korean, eat something that isn't instant noodles. I went. I wore the only formal dress I owned. Black, simple, the kind of dress that says I don't belong here, but I'm trying. The venue was a tower of glass and light. There were men in suits that cost more than my entire scholarship, women in silk who spoke in careful whispers. Everyone was performing wealth, performing power, performing ease. I was performing invisible. I stood near the back with a glass of champagne I wasn't drinking and watched the city glitter 40 floors below, and I told myself, 1 hour, then home. That's when I felt it. That sensation you get when someone's gaze lands on you too precisely, too deliberately. I turned. He was standing across the room with 2 men in dark suits flanking him. Tall, still. The kind of stillness that isn't relaxed. It's controlled. Like a man who had trained himself not to move unless he meant it. His face was sharp, clean-lined. His eyes were dark and unreadable from across the room, but he was looking directly at me. Not the way men look at women at parties, assessing, comparing, ranking. He was looking at me the way someone looks at a word they're trying to translate. Careful, curious, almost frustrated. I looked away. 5 minutes later, he was standing beside me. You haven't touched your drink, he said, in English, lightly accented. I don't drink much, I said. Then why hold it? I glanced at him sideways. Up close, he was even more controlled, every gesture precise. But there was something underneath it, something that flickered quickly behind his eyes before he buried it. Social armor, I said. He was quiet for a moment, then surprisingly, smart. His name was Seo Jin. He didn't offer a last name. He didn't explain who he was or why he was there. He asked me questions instead, where I was from, what I was studying, whether I found Seoul cold, not cold in temperature, cold in feeling. I said, sometimes. But beautiful things are often cold. He looked at me for a long moment after that. I thought nothing of it. I thought he was a businessman. A donor, maybe. Someone polished and slightly bored who found the foreign student in the corner mildly interesting for an evening. I left at 9:30. He didn't ask for my number. I told myself, good, and went home. 4 days later, I was walking between buildings on campus when a black car stopped at the curb beside me. The window came down. Seo Jin. I asked your professor if you were a student here, he said, like this was a normal thing. I stopped. That's a little concerning. I know. Most people would start with a phone number. I don't do things the normal way, he said. Would you like to have coffee? I should have said no. I know that now with the full clarity of everything that followed. I should have said no, walked away, gone back to my small apartment and my thesis and my instant noodles. Instead, I got in the car. And for 3 months, I lived inside the most beautiful lie I have ever been told. I didn't know that the building where we had our first coffee was registered to a shell company linked to 3 unsolved murders. I didn't know. But somewhere in Seoul that night, someone who worked for Seo Jin already knew my name. 3 months. 90 days of something I still don't have the right word for. He was careful with me in a way I had never experienced from a man. Not careful like he was holding back. Careful like he was paying attention. He remembered the name of my grandmother. He learned 3 phrases in Shona and used them badly and laughed at himself when I corrected him. He took me to neighborhoods in Seoul that weren't on any tourist map. Small alleys with grandmothers selling rice cakes, rooftop gardens above old buildings, a jazz bar in Mapo-gu where the musicians played until 3 a.m. and nobody cared who you were. I knew something was off. I wasn't naive. The cars. The men who stood at the edges of every room he entered. The phone calls he always took standing with his back to me, speaking fast and low. The way certain restaurants cleared out when we arrived. The way people looked at him, not with admiration, with something older, something more complicated. But I told myself it was just wealth, old money, business. I told myself the story I needed to tell. And then came that night. We had been at his apartment, a penthouse in Itaewon, spare and cold the way his offices were. But he kept one lamp on in the corner that made everything amber and soft. We had cooked together badly, laughing at the mess. He had his hand in my hair and was telling me something about his childhood. His father, the pressure, the silence that lived in their house. And it was the most unguarded I had ever seen him. I crossed a line that night. We both did. The world outside that apartment didn't exist for a few hours. And then, just before dawn, my phone fell off the nightstand and I leaned over to pick it up. And through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I saw the parking structure below. 3 men, a 4th man on his knees. Park Jae-won, Seo-jin's right hand, a man I had always disliked on instinct, standing over him. I won't describe what I saw. I can't. Not even now. But I understood in that moment, with absolute certainty, what Seo-jin was, what I had been sleeping beside, what had been looking at me with those careful, curious eyes. I didn't scream. I didn't wake him. I was too smart for that. Or too terrified, I still don't know which. I got dressed in the dark. I took nothing except my bag and my shoes. I walked out of that apartment at 4:47 a.m., and I never looked back. I told myself it was over. I told myself I was safe. I told myself that as I bought a plane ticket home with my emergency credit card. I told myself that on the 12-hour flight back to Harare. I was still telling myself that 6 weeks later when I sat on the bathroom floor of my mother's house, staring at 3 parallel lines on a pregnancy test. 3. The test was for a single pregnancy. But 3 lines meant. The doctor confirmed it 2 weeks later with an expression that was equal parts professional calm and barely concealed astonishment. Triplets. 3 boys, his sons. I never told him. I told myself that was the right choice. I told myself that for 5 years. But somewhere between the lie I built to survive and the truth I buried to protect my boys, I forgot that the world has a habit of forcing reckonings. My mother didn't ask too many questions. That's the thing about women like her. Women who have survived enough to know that some stories need to come out on their own time, or they don't come out at all. She saw my face when I walked through her door. She saw the weight behind my eyes. She made tea and sat across from me and waited. I told her I had been in a relationship, that it had ended badly, that I needed to come home. I didn't tell her the rest. Not yet. The pregnancy was hard in the way that carrying 3 lives is always hard. My body became a country under occupation, territory that no longer fully belonged to me. I was sick for 4 months. I was enormous by 6. I waddled through my mother's house while she fussed and prayed and cooked things I couldn't keep down. The boys arrived at 34 weeks, small, loud, furious at the world from the first second. Kwame, born first, silent for a terrifying 3 seconds before he screamed like he had a point to make. Tae Levi, born second, already trying to grab the doctor's fingers. Minolu, born last, the smallest, who looked up at me with eyes so precisely, painfully, like his father's, that I had to look away for a moment so the nurses wouldn't see me cry the wrong kind of tears. I gave them names that held both worlds, African first names, Korean middle names. I told myself it was for them, so they could carry both parts of themselves. I didn't let myself examine the other reason, that somewhere unconsciously I was leaving a door ajar. The first year was survival. Pure, exhausting, beautiful survival. 3 babies on a rotating schedule of feeds and crying and almost sleeping. My mother moved in. I worked from home where I could. translating documents, tutoring online, doing anything that could be done at 2 a.m. with a baby on my shoulder. The second year, I got a job at a Korean-owned restaurant in Harare, a small good place called Hanok that served authentic food to a mixed crowd of Korean expats and locals. I spoke Korean well enough to be useful. I was hired as a floor supervisor and eventually reduced, by circumstances and budget cuts, to waitress. I didn't mind. Not really. I minded that my boys were growing so fast and so beautifully, and that there was a whole half of them I was keeping locked in a room I never opened. I minded that Kwame J, at 3, had started asking why his eyes were different from other boys at school. I minded that I had no answer that was true. By the time the boys turned 4, I had settled into something that felt almost like peace. It wasn't happiness exactly. It was the particular steadiness of a woman who has stopped running and started building. I knew my schedule. I knew my life. I knew the small orbit of the restaurant and my mother's house and my boys' school. I thought I knew what my future looked like. I was wrong. On a Tuesday afternoon in March, the door of Hanok opened. I was behind the counter, refilling a water jug, not looking up. I heard the voice before I saw the face. Low, precise. Speaking Korean to the hostess. And something in my body, muscle memory maybe, or something deeper than muscle, went completely still. I looked up. Seo Jin, 5 years older. A little harder around the jaw. The same controlled stillness. The same expensive suit. He was scanning the restaurant the way he always scanned rooms. Assessing exits, reading people, cataloging everything. His eyes found me. For 1 second, neither of us moved. And then the corner of his mouth lifted. He smiled. No, not a smile. Smaller than that. Colder. The expression of a man who has just found something he finds mildly amusing. He said something to his companion. Park Jae-won, I realized with a drop of dread. And they both looked at me. Seo Jin's smile widened slightly. He was laughing at me. Not loudly, not cruelly maybe, not by his standards, but with the ease of a man who had moved on completely and found it vaguely entertaining that I had not. I felt 5 years of carefully constructed dignity begin to crack. And then I heard the back door. Small feet, 3 pairs of them. My boys had been with my mother in the back room waiting for my shift to end. Kwame J, Tae Levi, Min Olu. Come here, my loves. I don't know why I called them. I don't know if it was courage or cruelty or just the exhaustion of hiding. Maybe I just couldn't let him laugh at me 1 more second. They came running out, noisy and bright and tumbling over each other the way they always did. And they stopped beside me, looking up at the stranger with the curious, fearless directness of 4-year-olds. 3 boys, with their father's eyes. I watched Seo Jin's face. The smile disappeared. His entire body went still. A different stillness from his usual control. This was the stillness of a man whose entire world had just rearranged itself without his permission. Park Jae-won said something sharp in Korean. Seo Jin didn't answer. He was staring at my sons, and I held my ground for the first time in 5 years, and I stared right back at him. He hadn't said a single word yet. But his eyes had said everything, moving from boy to boy to boy, counting, calculating, something raw and unguarded breaking open behind his expression. Park Jae-won was already reaching for his phone. And I realized, too late, that calling my boys out had not been the end of the secret. It had been the beginning of the danger. The restaurant had gone quiet. Not the polite quiet of a dinner crowd settling, the specific, charged quiet that happens when the air in a room changes, when something invisible shifts and every person present feels it without understanding why. The staff felt it. The other customers felt it. Even my boys, who feared nothing and no one, went unusually still beside me. Seo Jin hadn't moved. He was standing 6 feet away from me with his eyes locked on Kwame Jae's face. And I watched something happen to him that I had never seen in 3 months of knowing him. I had seen him cold. I had seen him warm. I had seen him controlled to the point of seeming carved from stone. I had never seen him undone. He was undone. Tandiwe. His voice was low, careful, like he was placing the word down gently so nothing would break. Seo Jin, I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Good. I needed that. Park Jae-won stepped forward. We should... Don't. Seo Jin said it without looking at him. Just one word. Flat. Absolute. Jae-won stopped. Tae Levi, who had no concept of tension and no fear of strangers, pointed up at Seo-jin with the blunt confidence of a 4-year-old who has never been told the world is dangerous. Why does that man look like us? The Korean was accented with the Shona lilt he had picked up from his grandmother. It was the most devastating sentence I had ever heard in my life. I felt the blood drain from my face. Seo-jin crouched down, slowly, deliberately, until he was eye level with my 3 boys. And he looked at them. Really looked. The way you look at something you weren't prepared to love and suddenly can't imagine not loving. Kwame Jae stared back with his arms crossed, unmoved and unimpressed, the way he had stared down every new person in his life since birth. Min Olu hid slightly behind my leg. Tae Levi continued pointing. Seo-jin looked up at me from that crouched position, eyes raw in a way he would never have allowed 5 years ago, and said quietly, in Korean, "How long?" 4 years, I said. They turned 4 last month. He did the math. I watched him do it. I watched the moment it landed. He stood slowly. The rawness was already being covered, layer by layer, the control coming back, the armor reassembling. But I had seen underneath it. I had seen what was real. "We need to talk," he said. "We needed to talk 5 years ago," I said. "You weren't available. You were busy being what you are."
If you're listening to this right now, it's because this story has already pulled you in a little. But what you're hearing here is just a part of it. The full version includes 30 complete stories, no cuts. No ads, just the audio flowing while you listen. The QR code is on your screen now, or the link is pinned in the queue.
Something moved across his face. Pain, maybe. Or the shape of it. Boys. I looked down at my sons. "Go find Avo, now." They went. Kwame Jae last, walking backwards, eyes still fixed on Seo-jin with the particular suspicion of a child who understands more than adults give him credit for. The restaurant was still too quiet. I could feel every eye on us. I looked at Seo-jin. He looked at me. 5 years of silence, of running, of building a life on the foundation of a secret, compressed into a single moment standing in a restaurant in Harare, while the lunch crowd pretended not to stare. "Not here," I said. He nodded once. We sat at the corner table farthest from the other customers. Park Jae-won positioned himself near the door. I noticed, and I didn't like it, but I said nothing. Not yet. Seo-jin didn't speak immediately. He sat across from me with both hands flat on the table, looking down at them. A man organizing himself, building a sentence out of something that had no clean shape. "I laughed," he said finally. "You did. When I saw you behind the counter." He paused. It wasn't cruelty. I was surprised, and I handled it badly. "You handle most things badly," I said. "You just do it in expensive suits so it looks like composure." He looked up. And for a brief second, despite everything, despite the full weight of 5 years and 3 children and all the jagged reasons I had run, there was a flicker between us. Something that had never fully died. Something I resented deeply. "Tell me about them," he said. And I didn't want to. I wanted to be hard and closed and correct. I wanted the anger I had been carrying to be enough armor. But his voice when he said "tell me about them" had something in it I wasn't prepared for. So I told him. I told him that Kwame Jae was the leader, stubborn and protective and already convinced at 4 that he was responsible for his brothers. That Tae Levi was the chaos, joy running at full speed with no brakes, the one who had once tried to befriend a rooster and lost. That Minolu was the quiet one, the observer, the one who sat beside you and didn't say much but missed nothing. I told him they were healthy and brilliant and loud and more than I deserved and everything I had ever been grateful for. I watched Seo-jin listen. He listened the way he had always listened to me, completely. Like nothing else existed while I was speaking. And when I stopped, he said, "I would have come." "I know," I said. "That's why I didn't tell you." The words fell between us like stones. He absorbed them, didn't argue. Because somewhere in the part of him that was honest, he understood exactly what I meant. The world he led was not a world you brought children into. It was not a world you brought anyone you loved into. I had understood that from one terrible window at 4:47 in the morning. I had made a decision based on what I saw. And I had lived with that decision for 5 years. I didn't ask him to forgive me for it. He didn't ask me to apologize. It was Park Jae-won who ruined it. He came to the table, leaned down, and murmured something in Seo-jin's ear that made the warmth in Seo-jin's eyes go cold in an instant. He looked at me, then at the door where my boys had gone. And I felt it. The shift. The moment when this stopped being a conversation between two people who had once loved each other and became something else entirely. Something I had feared for 4 years. Someone back home already knows, Seo-jin said quietly. About the boys. I went cold, not the slow cold of fear building, the instant cold. The kind that arrives before your mind has caught up. My body understood the threat before my brain could name it. Who? I asked. The wrong people, Seo-jin said. Park Jae-won was already on his phone. Moving fast, efficient, covering exits. I knew that posture. I had seen it before in Seoul in the edges of rooms I should have paid more attention to. How long have you known I was here? I asked Seo-jin directly. He met my eyes. 3 days. 3 days. He had known for 3 days and still walked in here casually enough to laugh, which meant either he hadn't considered the danger or he had considered it and decided I wasn't a threat. But now someone else knew. Someone who would think about 3 half-Korean boys differently than Seo-jin did. Someone who would see them as leverage. We need to move your children, Seo-jin said. Low. Controlled. Already the other version of himself. The operational one. You are not touching my children, I said. Thandiwe. I left Seoul because of men exactly like the ones who are coming. My voice was quiet, but every word was precise. I built this life in this city so my boys would never be a piece on anyone's board. You do not get to walk in here and start moving them around like assets. That's not what Park Jae-won. I looked past Seo-jin directly at his right hand, the man who had always made my skin crawl with an instinct I now trusted completely. How long have you known about the boys? Jae-won's eyes slid to Seo-jin. That pause told me everything. Jae-won, Seo-jin said. His voice had gone very quiet. The particular quiet I recognized from the edges of his worst moods in Seoul. Answer her. Another pause. Then, 2 weeks. The number landed like a blow. Seo-jin turned to look at him slowly. You knew before I did. It wasn't a question. I was assessing the situation, making sure the information was accurate before 2 weeks. Seo-jin stood from the chair. He didn't raise his voice. He never raised his voice. He didn't need to. You knew I had sons for 2 weeks and you said nothing. The temperature in the room had dropped 10 degrees. I had seen Seo-jin cold before. I had never seen him cold at someone he trusted. It was different. It was worse. I stayed very still. Jae-won straightened, and then something shifted in his expression. The professional composure cracking just slightly, and underneath it something I recognized as calculated. This was not embarrassment. This was a man who had a plan and was watching it adjust in real time. I was protecting the organization, he said. Children are vulnerabilities. Heirs are complications. The council would never... The council. Seo-jin said it like the word itself was beneath him. They already know, Seo-jin. I didn't tell them. Someone else in Harare connected the dots. 2 days ago. They're sending people to... He stopped, corrected himself. To assess. To assess. I knew what that meant. I had spent 5 years making sure I never had to know what that meant in relation to my boys. I stood up. My children are not an organizational liability, I said. Every word controlled. Every word final. They are 4-year-old boys who like dinosaurs and rice and bothering their grandmother. And if anyone from Seoul comes within 10 meters of them, I will burn every secret I know about this organization to the ground. And I know enough, Jae-won. You both know I do. Silence. Seo-jin looked at me. And in that look, I saw something resolve. Not slowly, quickly. Like a decision that had been approaching for years and finally arrived. He turned to Jae-won. Tell the council the information was incorrect. No children. Mistaken identity. Jae-won stared at him. Seo-jin? That's an order. The council won't, I said. Each word separated, deliberate. That is an order. The air between them was taut and dangerous. Park Jae-won was a man who had served Seo-jin for a decade and had never directly defied him. I watched him calculate the cost of doing so now. Finally, slowly, he nodded. He left the table. Seo Jin sat back down. His hands were flat on the table again. That gesture I remembered, the one he used when he was holding himself together. He won't keep that order, I said quietly. You know that. I know, he said. So what are you going to do? He looked at the door where my boys had disappeared, and I saw it on his face. The thing I hadn't expected when I called their names out across that restaurant. The thing I hadn't prepared for because I had told myself for 5 years that he was only one thing. He was a father. He had been a father for 4 minutes, and he already looked like a man who would walk through fire. I'm going to fix it, he said. All of it. How? I asked. The only way I know how, he said. I didn't ask him to explain. I had lived in his world long enough to understand that some things were better not explained in full detail. But I watched his face, and for the first time in 5 years, I believed him. That night, my mother's house went dark at 9 p.m. the way it always did. My boys were asleep in their room, piled together the way they always slept. Tae Levi sprawled across both brothers, Min Olu curled at the edge, Kwame Jae on his back with his arms crossed like even in sleep he was standing guard. I sat in the dark hallway outside their door. And somewhere across the city, I knew Seo Jin was doing something that couldn't be undone. Something that would cost him everything he had built. I just didn't know yet if that was going to save us or end us. He came back the next morning, alone. No car, no Jaewon, no men in suits at the edges of the street. Just Seo Jin, standing at my mother's gate in the early light, wearing a plain gray shirt with his hands in his pockets, looking for the first time since I had known him, like an ordinary person. I let him in. My mother looked at him from the kitchen doorway the way only African mothers look at men who have caused their daughters pain, like she was measuring every bone in his body and deciding which ones deserved the least mercy. She said nothing. She went back to her cooking, which was somehow more frightening. The boys were at the table eating breakfast. Seo Jin stopped in the doorway. Kwame Jae looked up, put his spoon down, studied the man in the doorway with those old soul 4-year-old eyes. You came back, he said. Not a question, an observation. I came back, Seo Jin said. Tae Levi immediately offered him a piece of toast. Min Olu slid off his chair, walked slowly across the kitchen, and stood directly in front of Seo Jin, with his small face tipped up, examining him from about 3 inches away, with the focused intensity of a scientist. Then he nodded once, as if he had reached a conclusion, and went back to his seat. I had to look out the window for a moment. We talked while the boys played in the yard under my mother's watch. Seo Jin told me what he had done. He had called in every debt he was owed, and there were many, to build a wall of protection around the information about the boys. Not through violence, through leverage. Through the careful, precise application of power that he had spent 15 years accumulating. He had made it more dangerous for the council to move against his sons than to pretend they didn't exist. Park Jae-won? I asked. Handled, he said. I don't need details, I said, but I need to know my boys are safe. They are safe, he said. I promise you that. I sat with that for a long moment. Promise was a large word. It was a word I had learned not to trust. From him, from the world he inhabited, from the version of life where promises got made in penthouse apartments and then shattered through floor-to-ceiling windows before dawn. I want out, he said quietly. I looked at him. I've wanted out for 3 years, he said. I didn't have a reason that was strong enough to survive the process. He paused. I have 3 reasons now. I didn't answer immediately. This was the part no one tells you about in the stories. The part after the revelation and the confrontation, when the dust settles and you're sitting across from a man you once loved and currently resented and possibly still loved in the complicated, scarred way that doesn't go away no matter how far you run. The part where you have to decide not with your heart. Your heart had always been too loud, but with the quiet voice underneath it. The one that knew the truth. I looked out at the yard. Kwame Jae was instructing his brothers on something with great seriousness, using a stick to draw diagrams in the dirt. Tae Levi was immediately breaking the plan apart with enthusiastic modifications. Min Olu was sitting to the side, watching both of them, occasionally adding one quiet word that somehow settled everything. They were extraordinary. They were his sons. You don't get forgiveness today, I said. Seo Jin nodded. He had expected nothing less. You don't get a family in a week, or a month, or maybe even a year. You don't get to walk in here and be their father because it suits you now. You earn that. You earn it slowly, and you earn it on their terms, not yours. I understand, he said. And if I ever feel that my boys are in danger because of who you are or who you were, I will disappear again. Somewhere further. And this time you won't find me. I know, he said. Then quieter. I know you could do it. I know you're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. He paused. I never laughed at you because I thought you were beneath me. I laughed because seeing you, it hurt. In a way I wasn't prepared for. And I covered it the only way I knew how. I looked at him. That's still not an excuse, I said. No, he agreed. It's not. We sat in silence for a moment. Not the silence of two people who had nothing to say. The silence of two people who had said the important things and were letting them settle. From the yard, Tay Levi screamed with laughter about something. My mother's voice drifted through the window, low and fond and pretending to scold. Can I go meet them? Seo Jin asked. Quietly. Carefully. Like he already knew the answer wasn't automatically yes. Properly. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I stood. Kwame, Tay Levi, Min Olu. I called them to the porch. They came running. 3 small hurricanes barreling up the steps. And I crouched down to their level and I said, in the calm,
Maybe you're listening to this while doing something simple. Washing dishes, tidying up, trying to relax. And that's exactly why these stories work. When you unlock full access, you get 30 stories. Over 30 hours of audio with no interruptions. You press play, and the story just keeps going. If you want to continue right now, scan the QR code on your SC, or tap the link in the pinned comment. What was never said continues there.
Honest voice I had always used with them. This is Seo Jin. He is someone important. Someone who is going to be around for a while. And I need you to give him a chance. Can you do that for me? Kwame considered this with his arms crossed. Tay Levi had already grabbed Seo Jin's hand. Min Olu looked at me, those eyes that saw everything, and then looked at Seo Jin and said very simply, Are you going to make our mom cry again? The silence that followed was enormous. Seo Jin crouched down to Min Olu's level, and he said with complete honesty, the kind of honesty that you only find in a man who has run out of things to hide. Not if I can help it, but if I ever do, you have permission to be angry with me. Min Olu thought about this. Then he nodded once, turned, went back to his dirt diagrams. Kwame watched for another 3 seconds. Then slowly uncrossed his arms. Tay Levi was already dragging Seo Jin toward the yard to see the diagrams, talking at full speed in a mixture of Shona and Korean that made absolutely no sense and complete sense simultaneously. I stayed on the porch. And I watched Seo Jin, this man who had been a shadow and a wound and a ghost for 5 years, sit down in the dirt of my mother's yard in his expensive trousers and let a 4-year-old explain a dinosaur battle plan to him with total seriousness. I wasn't ready to call it love again. I wasn't ready to call it forgiveness. But I was willing for the first time to call it a beginning. And maybe, for now, that was enough. I thought the hardest part was running. I was wrong. The hardest part is staying. Standing still while someone learns how to be worthy of the life you built without them. Watching your children look at a stranger with your own eyes reflected back, and feeling your heart break and heal at the exact same time. We're not a family yet. Maybe we never will be. Not the clean, simple kind you see in dramas. We are something more complicated and more honest than that. But there are 3 boys in that yard who deserve to know every part of where they come from. And there is a woman, me, still deciding every single day if the love was real, or if I just loved the version of him that the darkness hadn't finished making yet. If you were me, would you give him the chance to earn it back? Or has too much time passed for some doors to reopen? And do you think Min Olu is right to be suspicious? Or do you think he already forgave him the moment he sat down in that dirt? 3 weeks after Seo Jin began coming to the house every afternoon, learning our routines, learning our boys, learning how to exist in a world that ran on school schedules and bedtime stories instead of boardrooms and threats, a letter arrived. No return address. Korean characters on the envelope. Addressed not to me. Addressed to Kwame, my eldest son. By name. By full name. including the Korean middle name I had never told anyone in Seoul. I held the letter in my hands for a long time before I called Seo-jin, and when he arrived and saw the envelope, the color drained from his face in a way I had never seen before. Not fear. Something older than fear. "Who sent this?" I asked. He looked at me. "My father," he said.